Hello. How's it going this evening? Slash night. Slash very late night. Shout out to the overseas listeners. Welcome to the Ziaire Williams stream, and I am blessed to be joined by a basketball savant, Evan Gualberto. Thank you so much for joining me after yet another another picture perfect delay from me. You rolled through it. You're taking a little time off from a playoff game, which again I appreciate everybody for doing so. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. I'm excited. I love this series, so you know, blessed to be a part of it.
So I struggle to watch like playoff games live because I like rewatching stuff, and because I do so much draft work, like having the 5 second rewind key is great. But seeing like slander in real time is something that can't really be appreciated. And just like 30 people typing in all caps, just one person's name, just call-ins in all caps is a feeling that rewatches don't quite do you justice. So moving aside from, I guess, the goal of draft work, which is the NBA playoffs, to a little bit of draft work ourselves, I wanted to sort of redirect this series a little bit because I think that there's the perception that draft work is very insular, that you either do it full time and have all the answers on everything, or you don't do it at all. And I think that I would really like to move the direction of this series is to getting different voices from different people, be it coaches, be it from scouts, be it from front office people all across through the world and all the way through Twitter, um, to look at a game and not ask the questions like who are the six best shooting guards in this class, or who's the best person to pick with the stashes at 47. Like, you're here to me because you're a person who has a great eye for X's and O's and really understands what can be expected of a person in a situation. And so I want to say thank you for stepping a little bit out of your comfort zone, but also I think that you're going to find that this is exactly your comfort zone because we're talking about ball. Um, Before we get into that, can you just real quick plug where people can find you, where your profound insights can be sampled at?
Sure. So first and foremost, Twitter. It's where a lot of people ask me questions. That's actually where I learn the most because when you ask questions, I often don't know the answer, so I have to go out looking for the answer. Twitter, EVIN underscore GUAL, Evan underscore Gual. And then from there, you can branch off. I'm super blessed to do two basketball video podcasts, one with Samson Folk bouncing around, the other about the WNBA with Sabrina Merchant, two of the best. And I make video compilations of players at my YouTube channel. So all of those things are in one place. Evan Gualberto, Google me, you'll find it.
Thank you, Big Daddy Jenkins, for the Twitch Prime subscription. Yeah, you can, you know, Eagle Eye viewers will often see his stamp in the left corner of the micro skills that we use. People with regular eyes, just look in that top left corner. There's his Twitter handle. Follow it. It's a wonderful thing. So I wanted to, before we get started, talk about a little bit of a question. So, who's the better prospect who would you pick between prospect A and prospect B? Prospect A, they're both freshmen. One shoots 39, 33, 77. One shoots 42, 29, 80. Both true shootings below 50, average in the same band of points. One has more rebounds, one has more assists, one has double the 3-point rate, about the same free throw rate. One's a better passer. The other turns the ball over more. About the same usage. About the same stocks, maybe a bit more per hay. Who would you pick?
I would. So when you throw numbers out, I often lose my mind. But I think the thing that jumps out is there's a level of similarity there, but the number that pops, which I don't necessarily know if rebounds. People can debate if rebounds can be stat padded, that thing, but the rebounds pop to me. So just everything kind of being equal, because I don't do numbers well, is B.
Okay, so you sign with the 51.9% of the Twitterati. Player B is Ziaire Williams, who we're going to be talking about today. Player A is Cam Reddish. I find it very interesting that these polls are close because Cam Reddish is by and large was considered a better prospect, and Cam, had serious like top 5 contention at one point, and Ziaire hasn't really been there since he got back from the injury. So let's dive into the film. There's our wonderful guest. Everybody, how are you doing? So we're going to talk about 5 things today. The first one is conclusions of offensive context, which is basically like, what can a viewer glean from what an offense does? And the Stanford offense, wonderfully done by Jared Haas, is an offense that like asks for specific things. I think that it can be difficult when you're evaluating the draft, or you're evaluating players in general, just to like understand what players are being asked to do and what the general like expectations are. Any thoughts on how to, or what you generally try to do when you're looking at a new or unique offensive system?
Well, I mean, what types of shots does it generate? What are you really looking for? Is it the type of thing where, if it's a system, right, is it the type of thing that you have to go out and get players to fit that system? Or is it more malleable? That type of stuff. It's just, I mean, there's so many different ways to think about and approach offense building that I mean, I look for what I look for is that does it generate the type of shots that you want it to generate? And, if you play a very specific style, like if you want to play fast, can you play fast with it? Is it the type of thing that it's very intentional and it slows things down, et cetera, that type of stuff.
So our second idea is taking more than the defense gives you. The saying is always, take what the defense gives you. There's a small problem with players like Ziaire Williams, who's close to 6'10", is that they can kind of get whatever they want, and the defense can just give them mediocre shots that they can get anytime they want to. And that's a challenge for him because players kind of have to learn what a good shot is, and like what's an uncomfortable shot for the defense. Like when you can always get an okay shot, it's really easy to get lulled into that. And for me, one of the things that was a long-term, I don't want to say criticism, but a long-term consideration for me was that like at times he can just keep living on okay from his shot selection perspective. And that's something that pairing the idea of like take more than the defense gives you and understanding offensive context, that makes draft scouting and just scouting in general more of an art than a science, where it's like, is this what he's being encouraged to take, or is this more, his decision-making process? Number 3, I have finding defensive disruption. Everyone knows Ziaire is sleight of frame. Is that a fair way of saying it? Shout out to the skinny boys. We're out here. We're trying to make a defensive impact. And he has to figure out ways of doing like more than deflections. If you're going to be on the slight side and you're going to always lose a little bit at BOA, how are you going to make that up? Is that by gambling a little bit more, or is that going to be helping off a little bit more by eating up space? Then the next, physical challenges. Ziaire is skinny, but with skinny comes some specific problems. It's usually movement issues. It can be explosiveness issues. There are circumstances he's going to find himself in that he needs to develop into. The NBA has proven to be extremely reliable at developing flexibility, which is something we're most certainly going to talk about. And it's just generally really hard to grow in multiple directions at one time. So like if you're growing physically, it's also hard to grow in flexibility at the same time. So Ziaire, is probably like 6'7", 6'7.5" as a high school, going into his high school senior year. And he's almost close to 6'10" now. I don't know if we're gonna get that in a combine setting, but that's certainly like what I've been told during this pre-draft process. And like, yeah, it makes sense if he has flexibility issues. And And then the last one, the one that I'm really excited to talk about, is the can-should divide, which is a magical thing that happens where people who can do a lot of stuff, people who can get off really difficult shots or can, do side steps and shoot with extreme negative momentum. But should they? Like, is this the possession where that should happen? How do you generally grade shot selection when you're watching a game?
Well, small advantage to big advantage is you've now manipulated the defense, or the defense is, it's number two, taking more than the defense gives you. But you've been given an opportunity, or you've made yourself an opportunity. Is that everything that we can get out of that possession? Are we good with that shot, like in a vacuum?
That's interesting, because the way that I've kind of come to think about this question of like can versus should is, what's the progression? Like, if you hit a sidestep this time, is it going to result in an adjustment for the defense, or are they just going to clap their hands and be like, look, like you get this a lot with Utah had this issue against the Clippers where it's like, are they getting good shots that are going to change an alteration, or the Clippers just going to be like, okay, like make that 9 times out of 10, or like the math shakes out on some extremely difficult shot making there. And so, like, for me, the difference between can and should is, does it force a decision from the defense the next time? Or are they simply just going to be like, look, if the 6'10" guy hits a double clutch fadeaway from 3, like, I'm not changing anything to worry about that shot. So, after a little bit of a track, let's bounce around into this film. So we are watching the at Colorado game. We're going to start in with a little bit of a back screen. Everything is motion for Stanford. They run a Utah Jazz level horizontal offense. They obviously don't have the same green light or shooters, and the defensive 3 seconds does change how it works. Here we get a form of a pin down, and Ziaire has a choice. He can read inside. He's reading the inside defender. He can back cut, or he can pop. And this is a thing that I didn't find him to be awesome at, which is that like he doesn't always read the defender the correct way, or he just goes for like the pop most of the time. Here he chooses a back cut and he does it really late. We see some of the physical issues pop up. Look how far his leg is out to make this cut, and look how oddly it's been. He did have a leg injury during this year, but there's no help over the top. This should be a bucket. On the second side, we're going to get some a form of a chop where they just they go over, and then we have an empty side DHO. Flat. Oh, this is a pitch and chase. Here we get an okay read of the screen. You're going to see a repeated issue where guards can fight through because he leaves windows. They're not as bad as some other guys we've talked about, but he attacks downhill, gets 2 defenders, you get a reasonable possession. So here we are, first look. We see the ball get reversed twice. Is this what you thought you were going to get in for? Was a heavy motion offense where everything's just a twirl away?
Ball screen motion it is what it is. I guess that seems really dumb to say, but if you've ever tried coaching with it or implementing it, it does what it does, and it gets you what it gets you, but that's the extent of it.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I want to talk about is reading screens. So here we're going to see Braun reading Gay. Gay is going to try to read this as DHO. So he's going to get a little bit aggressive to try to break it up. He shields himself completely from Gay. Stops seeing the ball, and this allows him to get set up. Braun, moves in close to create a little bit of contact, and he's going to use a slight rip through. There's no help over top. LaMarcus and I think it's DeMar are nowhere really to be seen. You can see this little rip through. And like the way that Braun uses his hands on his cuts are great, but he's setting the defender up for everything. And I think that what we're going to see from Ziaire is that he's not always setting defenders up. He's kind of thinking about the next action instead of realizing that at any point in these motion offenses, which is just a thing that happens a lot with motion, is that like you get caught up in like doing the next thing right, and you're not realizing that every element can be a scoring opportunity. So that's the cut side. Let's talk about like what happens if somebody top locks. This is Erika, I believe, and like we're going to see hard top lock. Like absolutely no chance you're getting close. It's the same down screen, and you just flare it back out to the corner. And so the idea here is that any coverage that a defender gives you, whether it's tight, whether it's top locked, whether they go double under, there needs to be a coverage solution because teams can't be fine in what they're doing. They can't just be like, okay, we'll live with what's happening. They need to continue whatever decision they make. There needs to be a counteraction. And like these are just some of the options that we have. But when we watch him process screens, I think that for the level of threat he can be as a shooter, there just needs to be more of there needs to be more optionality from him that defenses need to be.
Right, and I mean the thing about this too is, I specifically said this to you before, like when we were like working through this process. Is it also the footwork isn't where I think it needs to be in order to make the defender's decisions tougher. Like all you have to do as a defender is to make the offensive player stop and adjust to what you want them to be doing. And Ziaire, more often than not, takes the path of least resistance. Or if that's not a fair thing to say, like he gives away his intentions, you know, with his feet or with his body angle, instead of setting up the cut or setting up using the screen or not using the screen.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of in my notes likened it to the kid who enjoys not studying for the test, like who wants to just do it off the strength of like, no, I got this. And that's at times what it felt like, where he's just like, no, I got this. And it worked often because, I mean, he's insanely talented. But other times it's like, it's just not going to, especially when we meet defenders who are quick enough and strong enough and fast enough. And like, when you're watching technique, like you have to sort of, you know, run it against the ghost of the NBA defenders and being like, okay, is he open enough that like he can get this over Josh Jackson? Is he open enough that he can get this over Miles Bridges? Is he open enough that he can get this over Mikal Bridges? Like, these are the levels that we have to think about. And like whenever there's areas where you're like, okay, this could use some work, like those are the things that NBA defenders are going to target. Because if you're lazy in the NBA, it just shows up on the scouting report the second time. So you mentioned the footwork, and to me, there's a very real biomechanical reason for that. Like he struggles with core stability. And so like you'll see his moves, and like this white box that I've drawn is sort of like the general like way you think of inside your body. And his handle is generally inside of his body, not really wide, as opposed to like BJ Boston, whose handle is like basically as far as his arms can be. But Ziaire's lower body is outside of his body. So like sort of the ideal handle is your feet go occasionally out, in and out to fool defenders. But he always has his legs out and his hands in, which makes you really non-explosive. And I think that the reason for this is that his shin angles are generally poor, which is a general portender of the inability to generate force. His posterior chain is not really involved in how he in how he explodes out of moves, and there's like just a general flexibility. So I think you have core stability, you have flexibility, and you have explosiveness, and that's why you have moments like these where it's like the footwork isn't quite to the level of like what it could be, and like there's just clear value on value there, and so like moments like this, like see, I'll run this up. Is that like this should be advantage, and he just isn't able to really convert on it because he's still struggling through the body aspect of it. Like this turns into a rondo. Look at the difference between the screen. They go under, and there's no penalty. Like anytime, if you're a shooter, if people go under, we talked about this last week, like dead leg, stop behind the screen, like stop. And then he has like some issues with his hands. I think his hands aren't strong enough, or maybe he's still like recovering from the bike accident. But there's a number of times where like his brain's moving faster than his hands, which again is almost always a textbook sign of growing. I have a thing that's like, if you want to know how to play basketball and you are a young professional, find the oldest point guard you can possibly find, because they are getting by on guile and tricks, and like they can't do anything wrong because they'll be out of the league. So like when you watch like Jared Jack, he's running everybody off these screens at the perfect time. Like he's making these guys who feasibly could take his spot work so hard. And I just want to see like younger guys reach out to the older guys and just be like, this dude is still in the league, above like way longer than he should. And it's just because he has these small details down. And those small details are, you know, like what keep you in the league, but also like what keep you successful in the league. If you are, you know, it takes you from good to great, or from not in the league to in the league. I liked his defensive awareness. I don't know about you. I felt like he did a good job of always checking with the ball in the man. And he gambled generally when he had help behind him. So here he has, I think it's O'Connell behind him, and he can take a little bit more range because he knows he has help. And then when that's not there, he goes to a little more conservative position. The wingspan is like plus 2.5, which isn't fantastic. I mean, he gets the bonus of being skinny, where you just let people's arms look longer. But I do find him to be like a generally rangy defender who has, you know, some physicality issues in terms of who's making that length impactful. But he can certainly like cover ground quickly, and I find him to be like pretty aware. Is that, you know, what you saw in the bit that you watched?
Yeah, so I think I mean there's a level of disruptiveness there, but it's also too I don't that's the thing. I don't watch very much Stanford at all, actually, or even Colorado. So like I don't necessarily know if like the passes, the reads, they are crisp or they're supposed to be. But yeah, I found him generally to be more disruptive than, say, like the average player out there.
Yeah. So here we're gonna get this is the like give more than what the defense is giving. So they run this a lot. You know, it's sort of a displaced version of horns, or instead of having, you know, two at the elbows, you have one at the elbow, one at the wing, and it just results in, you know, a middle pick and roll that's pretty hard to guard with, you know, a smudge on the weak side for the roller, and he can get this shot where he releases it basically at rim level whenever he wants to. Like it is, his release is about 10 feet tall, and that's really hard to challenge. I mean, like he has some difficulty to get more out of this, and like is this a great shot on its own? For this possession, maybe. But if that's always what you're getting, it can be problems. And we've sort of seen this issue play out with a number of other guys, where it's like they're getting okay shots or solid shots, but it's never fantastic. And like that was young Brandon Ingram's issue. That was like this has been a Kuzma issue for a long time, which is that like he can get the shots that he wants, and he can, like, because of the release point, get to these jumpers that like are not like they're just really hard to challenge. But they're not necessarily like signs of productive offense. Can you build an offense from this exact move? No. Because the counter is just like, you get closer. You live with it if it goes, you don't live with it if it doesn't situation. And we're going to get the clip that I would love you to talk about right now, that you were so nice to send to me before we got on. Let's get through one more time. Thought I did something cool there. And like I think that this is a style of guy that we've seen in the league in the past like 10 years or so, which are these like fours that can knock down impressive shots. Gallo being maybe like one of the supreme examples. Look at where he releases this.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so the thing about the first clip, and you'll see this a number of times, is like I think it's pistol-ish is what it feels like. So Bowser to Bowser, you know, I talk about this all the time. It's like, what is this action really, and so on and so forth. But the shot that Ziaire gets out of this action right here, it looks like pistol because it's free throw line extended, but he cheats it a little bit, and then he goes right into, like, he gets a ball screen to go right into the elbow area. And it's an action that they ran for him a bunch, and more often than not, what ends up happening is he takes a pull-up wherever the defense stops him at. He can, if he sells it a little more, or if he's maybe a little lower, then he could probably generate more space or create a better angle for himself to get, not necessarily more downhill, but take another step. Because another step is a paint touch. And, you know, if a pistol is something that practically every team in the NBA runs, or every team in the NBA does run. So if that's a shot that he's going to settle for, then more often than not, I think the defense is living with that shot. And so it goes back to your question of can versus should. Like, can he take that shot? Can he make that shot? Yeah. But should he? Probably not at the NBA level, because defenses are like, all right, cool. We're good with that. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a little bit too, it's peripheral. So hypothetically, a player should be able to see that even if that's not getting called out. So, it's the reaction time, the reaction speed. Like, if he doesn't have the ability to close that space in a short amount of time, like you said, then these are things that you have to be able to prepare for. Like, that the progression of this is coming. Like you said, they caught him by surprise, and that, it's fine for this game. But at the NBA level, I don't imagine that that's something that people are going to be good with.
That's an interesting point. So sorry, there's some fireworks outside that I don't have control over. So next, we're going to get into this like jab series that you like so much. So that we get an around the horn swing, and he's jabbing here, and so they're pushing him baseline. And when you jab, you kind of need to attack a foot. You need to get a defensive, and there's going to be a pick and roll coming. He gets again, the gravity level is very high. So we have 4 hands up to try to prevent the jumper. He's able to dump it off. Great results, but I still think that he is not really coupling like what the defense is doing with what he could be. Like, we're going to get more into this jab series a little bit later, but I just want to ask what look at what he's jabbing at, and like he gets the result he wants to here, but he's not always processing out. He's not really processing out what is happening. So like, let's talk about what a great jab series is. Here we have Brandon Ingram versus a very aggressive defender. And like most people, because Ziaire is skinny, are going to be very aggressive. So we start with pushing, away from it. We've already got a whole bunch of footwork movement, and now Okogie is bent at the waist. And Ingram is going to target that outside foot. He gets the outside foot on the rip through. Now the feet are flipped. It's off balance, and he can explode. So in this one series, he was able to move Okogie 3 or 4 times and get him all the way off balance. Like, this is a fantastic example against an extremely aggressive defender, but this is what it looks like when you've executed, like when you've coupled what the defender is trying to take away with moves designed to trick. And this is what you do when you are skinnier, is you need to move defenders so that they will be too aggressive. You can maneuver them into the area you want, and then abuse their aggressiveness and use it against you.
Right? Yeah.
So yeah, it's Jimmy doing roughly the same thing. Go ahead.
So I was gonna say, yeah, when you look at that clip and just generally his jab series, it's I coach high schoolers who do this. I feel it's a little more purposeful than jabbing for the sake of jabbing, but he's predetermined that he's going to jab. So it's something that either it has worked for him in the past, or it's an instinct thing that he has a hard time cutting out. Similarly, I coached a player who he mastered the size up, like Steve Nash-esque hezzy. Like, he'll jab, he'll rip, and then he'll size up. And like for a while, we were like the coaching staff was telling him to stop it, because sometimes he gets the blow by, but because of his wide hezi, like the defender has time to catch up. It feels like that's what he's doing here. When he jabs, like it's not necessarily the most purposeful thing. Like he's not going at the defender. He's, for that one in particular, it felt like doing it for the sake of doing it. And there are multiple instances, especially throughout this game, that I was telling you about, where it's like, okay, so I don't understand why he did it there when he didn't need to, and then later on it could have rocked the defender or moved the defender and created an angle for him, but then he didn't. So that's what's confusing to me about when he jabs.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it just feels like he is doing, like, sort of going from, like, this has worked in this situation before, and, like, it's just not adapting to the new world. I'm glad that I cut this one this way. Just after, like, the E in Geico is where he's catching the ball, which is a little bit tough. Here we see a beautiful play design where we have empty corners, so the taggers are really high for this pick and roll, so they have to make their decisions super early. He's going to snake this pick and roll into the middle, get a reasonable shot. Like, this is a good enough result, but this is another one where, like, I don't always feel like the process is fantastic for holding second and third defenders accountable, because when he gets rolling, he gets a ton of attention, and he doesn't always keep them 100%. Like, the difference between his good games and his bad games is generally, like, either he can't quite pick the defenses, like, apart mentally, or the shots go. And sometimes, like, he'll have a bad game with, like, the reads, but the shots are going, so it doesn't matter. And I just want to see a little better process for holding that third defender accountable, because if he waits a half second in that jail spot, I'll pause it where he should wait. If he pauses right here, that defender has to choose between going out to going out to the shooter and helping down. And he's in a very advantageous position, and you just want to hold that advantage as long as possible. Like, yeah, he's probably going to get, if he gets a good shot, this 12-foot for him is a good shot. But the process of holding defenders accountable doesn't always feel as on point as it could. And that's the point that I keep coming back to. It's like the next point for him is just like getting defenses to extremely uncomfortable questions and then making them sit in those questions. You're like, okay, what are you going to do? Long stare, wrong choice. Instead, it's like, oh, you did that, cool, I'm doing this. And there's just not that interfacing with the question the defense is trying to ask and flipping it back on them, being like, wow, that's crazy you chose to help out that time, because this ball is bounce pass going to the big. And the next time, like, oh, you think I'm going to the big? No, look, like, that's how you get, like, it's difficult to compare him and a guy like Luka. Is like, the reason why Luka is such a pain to defend is because he's just staring at help defenders, laughing at them, being like, oh, what are you going to do? You're going to try to stunt? Okay, the second you plant on that stunt to go back to your coverage, that's when the pass is coming out. Don't try to do that again.
Yeah.
And, like, you hold defenders accountable by making, when they gamble, they have to interface with, like, they were wrong. And now they're thinking, like, okay, so last time he did this. Now you've got them not thinking play at hand. They're playing out of their minds, not they're playing, out of their instincts. And ball handlers can't let defenders play out of their instincts.
Right. There's nothing really for me to add, except for if you go back and rewind this play, like I messaged you this and you actually told me to save it for the stream, so I'll use it now. But so Stanford does this, like, horizontal, as you called it. It's a lot of east to west stuff. What's super interesting to me here is, like, it goes one side, and as it's getting reversed, you can sort of see Ziaire, like, shortcut the. So he's gonna come up higher than the other player, and so he can he knows he's going to be able to attack he's going to get a ball screen there. He sort of shortcuts the offense so he can get to a spot where he gets the ball and attacks. And, like, I messaged you this. I said maybe my perception is just colored by the fact that, like, I coached the player, terrifically smart, like, knew the offense like the back of his hand player. But the problem was he knew the offense to the point where he could circumvent everything that was supposed to happen so he could get the ball and attack in a pick and roll or attack at the elbow, et cetera, et cetera. So, I don't know if that's necessarily what's happening here, or if it's a design play or anything, but the ability to shortcut to get to a spot so you can get the ball and go is fun to me, because I don't know if, I mean, I'm not in that locker room, I'm not on that practice floor, so I don't know if that was on purpose, but
Yeah,
it seems like
that's definitely something that, I mean, I've seen Ziaire since he was like a sophomore in high school. And like that's something that like that was a later clock situation, and he's just like, okay, like this offense has a chance. Like now it's like sort of everybody has their late clock like offense. 7 seconds or whatever, like the buzzer will just go off and say, okay, now it's time for me, like to solve
right.
this defensive problem. You guys had 28, let me get 7. Here we get one of his jabs. It's again in the corner. He just doesn't get the defender's waist removed. To misalign, so they're able to stick with him. This is the first step of a step back. And this is sort of where you get special. There's step 2. You could drive like a mid-size SUV separation. And like that's the thing here is that like this is not, I would say that this is a solid rep, but that solid rep results in very big spacing. The thing is that like when you have spacing like this from the pick and roll, that difference right there is the difference between the defender like diving over next time and him being able to walk. And that if he gets that jab series tightened and gets the pick and roll tightened, you get to have a thing that happens where defenders have to respond to the preview, which is sort of like going to be a theme. Is like instead of doing the work, doing what is the defender is giving you. A thing that I will note, it doesn't show up as much in this one. I don't think that Colorado offered the specific problems, is that his step back is often a backwards move, but it's not a forwards to backwards move. And the difference being that like if you like we've all played against players or seen players or seen videos of players who take step backs because they can't get anything going. Like they'll do 3 or 4 crossovers, they're not going anywhere. It's like, okay, step back. It's like, yeah, you can get that shot whenever, but it's like, especially if you like played a little brother that has a step back or whatever, it's like you didn't make me worry. And it's not the same thing, but it's the idea that like when you're a tough shot maker, those can seem like good shots. And like the thing that I'm really excited once his body gets into alignment and once I think he tightens his handle, is that like he's going to be able to weaponize that step back going forwards to backwards in a way that like that separation is going to mean a lot more. So here's Joe Ingles giving Paul George some nightmares. So hard closeout from Paul George, pushing him middle, nothing high, extremely hard closeout. I got like a little bit mistimed on the here, and so he's selling out hard, just like, hey, no middle, we're flattening him out towards help. Ingles has everything on that left leg, step back. Rates about 6 or 7. Again, look how much weight is on that left foot. This looks exactly like a hard flow by, and it's just going to be simple back step. The difference between that and what Ziaire did is like Ziaire was going around a screen and was just like, okay, no, I'm going to take this 3. Instead of turning the corner and then popping back, which is way more threatening. Because like there's a real worry that Joe Ingles gets the cup here, where there wasn't a particular worry that Ziaire was going to turn the corner because he didn't have the footwork for it in that moment. And I think that separation matters when we're talking about like, okay, is that a move that works on Cal Bridges? Is that a move that works on DeJounte Murray? Engage a posterior chain, going downhill, hard dribble step. Here we get a little bit of the physical concerns from a dead stop. So here we see him on a conservative help. The red lines are like how far generally guys think they should help over. Like the farthest line being like I can close down acres of space. And like if he's near 6'10", this should probably be punched. But again, like we don't know like what the foul situation is. We don't know like what his particular rules are. But it's just discouraging to see similar sized players and they're not being like the worry. Like this guy goes up strong. It's one thing if somebody is worried about the presence enough. It's another when they can just go up strong without a worry of getting met at the summit. And I think that he does have like this is not particularly representative, but it does speak to his general movement preferences. He's best on the move, and he struggles a little bit more if it's just like what I call telephone booth athleticism, which is just like in extremely small spaces. You don't have time to to charge up or anything. It's just like, all right, gotta go. Explode out of a telephone booth. And in those moments, he's his weakest. He's his best when he can smooth his energy transfer along the physical chain and use all of that going forward. So like a run and jump versus that athlete's one category, and then the other category you have phone booth, which are generally like stockier dudes, more like football player types. And then like on the other hand, you have like James Flight White, who you gave him 2 steps could jump over a building. So this sort of speaks to a mixture of like some of the concerns, but also like some of the physical realities that he's going to have to overcome.
Right, and I mean the thing about that clip is again like the context of like foul situation, exhaustion, things like that. Something I learned from watching and listening to the broadcast is that Stanford was missing a number of players, so the rotation might have been a little shorter. But like in that situation, if you just if you can rewind it back just a little bit, like you should be able to see. I mean, this guy built like a boulder like coming downhill. Like that's something you can see, and whether or not it's like a foul situation or whatever, if he's rotating over and he's using that size and his wingspan, like if he rotates at least even a half step and his arms are up, then now you've put the defender in, or the offensive player in a tough spot because he's catching and now he's having to finish around or maybe through you, as opposed to, I mean, he's just a bystander here. Like he puts it's a token show raising his arms, but
Yeah.
it doesn't really affect the play at all.
The rule is, the person in front of you moves, you move. And he sees the double go, doesn't have it. Okay, now I'd like to talk about a thing that I think comes up a lot, which is the idea of a first step. And I'm going to pause this because this might be a little bit longer winded. Is that like, I think there's the idea that a first step is based in quickness, which is just not true. Like a first step has very little to do with this. A first step is about energy generation. So like it doesn't matter how fast you go from 0 step to first step. It matters how fast you go from first step to second step. How much power you can generate. Like I guess like I was always taught that like first step was just like, hey, you gotta get faster, you gotta get faster, you gotta get faster. And as I've learned about like, I follow a number of like weight room guys on Twitter. I follow people who do the physical sciences, and they're like, that doesn't really make any sense. Like you don't get faster, you just get better at energy transfer and you get stronger. You're not like moving quicker, you're pushing your body off the ground stronger. And one of the ways that this happens is one, just like being stronger, and two, with an idea that we call Shin Angle. And so Shin Angle is a way of seeing like flexibility, and the flexibility which allows the ability to generate better force. So like a Shin Angle by itself is not particularly meaningful, but a Shin Angle combined with the ability to generate force generally creates what we would say are good first step athletes, which is a bit of a misnomer because again, it's not about how quick you go from 0 step to 1 step. Like a lot of fast guys who don't get off the blocks really quickly. They're better later when their energy transfer works for them. And a lot of slow guys whose first step is incredible. Like you think about Carmelo Anthony's first step, just a blur. Like you wouldn't call him necessarily fast, but you say he's great at generating power because like look what he's built like. Yeah, his first step is out of a cannon. And so like with Ziaire and with skinny guys, there's often an issue where they have really long first steps, but they don't have like explosive first steps because they don't have the flexibility to harness their posterior chain, which is like running from your Achilles to your butt. And so like you literally are using the front half of your body to blow by people. And like what's the strongest muscle in your body? It's the butt. You're generally going to want that to blow by people. So when you see people with a really Shin Angle like he does, and like we're going to see people who have really good and then mediocre, you get an idea of like what you look for when there's these lines and why some guys have like banana out their cuts to any of this scan for you?
Yeah, no, I like when I have an idea of what's coming. So yeah, the players in question, it's not necessarily. Hold on, let me start again. Okay, so I completely agree. It's the idea that you like get stronger in your first step, or like you get quicker, you get faster. Like that's never necessarily tracked for me. It's always what you do like right after that is like, so youth basketball, when you teach like a jab or a rip, you teach, if you have the angle, you teach a push out dribble, right? And so, like, because the idea is that you're now occupying that space because you have taken an angle and you're loading your legs and you're generating force. So like whether or not you have an explosive first step, like you teach that in youth basketball, that jab, rip, push out, dribble. And it's because what you're doing is you're covering ground and you're trying to get your foot down as quick as possible the next time, as opposed to just like relying on, oh, my first step is dynamite. But if you can't do anything with the advantage you've created, then like it's nothing there. Does that make sense?
No, it makes great sense. I mean, I think that this is one of those like areas that are sort of like poorly explained because it wasn't really investigated. Somebody came up with the term first step, and like that was sort of the end of the academic pursuit for most of the basketball world.
Yeah.
And I wasn't like, hey, how do these force dynamics actually work? Or like, what makes a good first step? It's like, well, you know, fast guys, yeah, it's like that. Like, that's how it was explained to me for like literally my whole life. Was like, hey, have you tried being faster? I was like, what do you mean? Like, yes, I very much would like to be faster. It just doesn't, you know, like, hey, just move quicker. What is this you're trying to teach me right now? So we'll see that.
Yeah, it's
Go ahead.
Oh no, I just the other thing is when so high schoolers, like high school boys especially, obsessed with trying to dunk, and it's always like, oh yeah, it's always about like a running start or whatever it is. And I go, actually, it's about your penultimate step. If you look at it like in a vacuum, when you take those, if you're like a 1-2 jumper. So when you go 1-2 and you do that arm swing, your arm swing generates momentum. It's about, you know, transferring force from into the ground, transferring that speed into force into the ground and then up. It's not about like how big your run up is or anything like that. It's about the second to last step you take, the penultimate step, and now you're loaded and you're springing up. And I think it's very similar to that. It's not about like the run up. It's very much about how much force you generate in that run up that you can load. Because if you're not loading properly, then all that momentum is wasted. So that's why I believe it's something along the lines of like, if your run up, jump, and reach is only like the same or 1 or 2 inches higher than your like one step or standing vert, then it's about your form is incorrect, and that's what you have to tweak, as opposed to, oh, you just have to get stronger, because that's not necessarily what it's about. It has to translate.
So what is bad Shin Angle look? So we see here it's a really acute angle, and like it's just not how you would generally like imagine leg lifts, like lunges or things like that. Like what you generally want from a Shin Angle is your knee to be out in front, like your foot to be able to hold the force of your body going. It's like we've all seen the picture of Derrick Rose like leaned over like a Formula One or whatever. Sorry for any fireworks in the background. We want to be able to create force going. And that's what we're generally looking for. When you can't do that correctly, you get really steep banana cuts, like this, where Zaire's going to come off this again, like this cut, pick and roll that they run a lot for him, and he's going to pop all the way out over there. He's going to go so wide. Again, this is a pretty uncontested area, but he goes so wide that the guard is able, I think it's McKinley, right, is able to take a better route and get to him faster. And this is like a pretty meaningful difference, because that is what allows like the defense to get there on this help, and it's what allows like 3 people to cover him. Is that if he were there on time, this would have to be like this help would have to be even more extravagant than it currently is, and his windows would be more open. So basically, there was a window for this play easier. He wasn't able to reach his physical abilities. And you know he could have got this ball out, but it's more about the idea of like, had his Shin Angle better, he would have got there faster. Therefore, this charge wouldn't have been square, and obviously banned the charge. So let's talk about what a great Shin Angle is like. Michael Jordan. you see how far that knee is over the toes? You see how all of his weight is forward, and he's able to put, because he's so far forward, his posterior chain is handling more of the force creation. Again, he's doing this in threes, which is just madness. Like when we watch it in slow motion, you can sort of like see the muscular difference. That's foot forward out of between the legs, able to put all of his generation forward, and that's enough to bump Joe Dumars off his spot. Just not particularly. What's mediocre look like? Here we have player A in the poll, Cam Reddish. He was going to similarly balloon a cut because he comes off and has an okay force generation. I think we had 3 or 4 looks at this. Shout out to multiple camera angles from the Atlanta Hawks. And as we can see, it's pretty acute. And because of that acuteness, it bumps him out. Like, again, KD's there, but it's not like he could have gotten a corner. And look how wide it takes him. And this has been a consistent issue for him. Again, tall and skinny, has these issues. Again, he's forward. It's sort of hidden by the fact that like he's turning a corner here, so like it's not actually as far forward as it looks. He's bananaing out, and that's what turns what will probably be a layup into a tough finish. And like because the basketball is microseconds, like those for getting a good shit angle on first and second steps. Sometimes people have a great first one, and the second one isn't good. Is what separates like good and mediocre drive attempts. So that's a thing to watch for, especially with skinnier guys, how their shin angle impacts how they're able to drive to the rim and how they look at explosiveness and how it can. Again, like he probably should see this charge coming. But the thing that I'm thinking about was when you're able to activate his posterior chain, when you're able to get to spots more efficiently, and you develop the handle, these circumstances aren't going to have to happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you look at, and this is what I was talking about with the pistol earlier, because I think it looks similar to that. Is when he's turning that corner, it's like if he takes a straight line there, he can get straight to the elbow, and his defender isn't there. He can take one dribble, and now that's you've turned that into a paint touch, which will draw the help, and then that's a kick out. Or you're playing from that. But because he has to go wider, like you were saying, it went from like minor advantage to extreme disadvantage because he has to go the long way.
Yeah, and like again, athleticism is a dynamic term. Like the geography of it is unique to every player and unique to every body type. So like while he does have those issues, he can also cover like ground extremely quickly, like on this one, where he's going to fight through like I think this is planned. I don't know if this was your read on this particular play, where there's this really late back cut from like from this short situation. That's almost a disguise. And he's able to close this down and then fight from like a pretty compromised position to getting a challenge on this ball. So I think that he's really good like at big space. Like when he's up to full speed, or when he does, when he knows he can just like go 100% in one direction laterally, he's fine. It's that I think it's honestly just like generating that posterior force, that the hamstring, the calves, like which is I think the textbook skinny guy issue to me. So it's funny that like sliding not an issue, but like the getting downhill, because you'd think that there's sort of here we get another back cut, pop, read option. I just think this is a circumstance where like he should be feasting. He doesn't make a great read. He's able to get to the defense still. I think that he has the backdoor as this play starts. You see I think it's Ken McKinley like climb up, and he commits to like chasing right there. And if he plants, there's a backdoor. He's again gets bumped out a little bit. Here, you see him try to finish. His hips are super high into the big, and this kind of goes against. Here we have 2008 or 2010 Paul George versus 2010 Gordon Hayward in summer league, and we're gonna get a chop rip through. So it's like a rip through over the head. These are two like I would say Paul George is formerly skinny. He's like starting to the point where he's adding weight. Gordon Hayward exiting skinny as well, and you'll see on the second angle that Paul George gets as low as possible on the rip through. And targets a lower hip level than where Hayward is. So Hayward hip is black, Paul George is red, He's getting lower and he's creating violence lower to brush back the person who's strong. And by using that leverage, he's able to knock a stronger player away. Just watching this again in slow motion, he's able to use leverage in a way that, like, Ziaire targeted the hip high. You don't have to necessarily be stronger than someone. You just have to understand where to hit them if they're not expecting it, or to the degree of force. You're able to get a solution. And this is the stuff that I would like to see from Ziaire, is trying to craft, like, we talked about this previously, is here we have Cam doing the same thing, another somewhat cute Shin Angle from him. Just had to note it as well. Is you have to, like, it's not about creating contact, it's about creative contact. So figuring out what works for you and trying to engineer situations where you know that you have either a slight advantage or it's just like the way that you work best. So you can see, like, again, you don't think of Cam as somebody that's hyper physical, but he's going to continually try to get a lower position on a similarly skinny guy and then extend the other way, because he does have that length. So he figures, okay, if I can just hold my own and keep my stability, I can find a finishing. And I think we get another one of these. There's one bump, right? This is our first one. So, like, he could have finished on this. Then he comes back for a second bump on the pro hop and is able to pin his man back. That's all the strength level it takes when you know how to use that strength. So, like, I think Ziaire's, like, strength level is a concern, but the bigger concern for me is that him is the growth curve of this particular framing of, like, look, I might be skinny, but that doesn't mean that I don't know a little bit about how angles work and, like, the wrestling with the ball. Being like, yeah, I can get low enough for 2 seconds. Which, again, is its own concern for tall and skinny with high hips, but something that comes up for me.
Yeah, I mean, if we can go back to the Cam example, is actually a really great example, because it's I think this is what I saw in real time with Ziaire, is he takes a pro hop and he finishes with his left hand. And I mean, the size differential between Cam and his defender here in Ziaire and whoever that player was for Colorado is much more drastic. But the little stuff that, it's crazy that, I mean, I know this is what you were looking for, but what I saw in the Ziaire one is, I think I messaged this to you, where it's the intentionality, or not the intentionality, he's giving away what he's going to be doing based on, like, his body. And if you could just, like, take it back this is it, yeah. So, like, if you can pause it right there, like, his feet are angled out. He knows he's going to get that screen, and he's going. And so he's making the defender's job much easier, because he's leaning. Like you said, he has the backdoor read right there, and he's being given that read, more or less. But because his hips are slightly tilted, like he's facing the ball in that direction, the defender doesn't have to commit to anything, because you have to turn slightly, and I don't think he's like a rapid mover, but he's turned. He's giving it away. So McKinley can be facing the ball and out of his peripheral see Ziaire and, be able to stop the action. But yeah, it's just minor stuff like that, I mean, I'm sure he's going to be able to pick this stuff up, and, like, he's not as strong as he will be, obviously. But yeah, it's just the minor stuff that changes everything.
Yeah, I mean, like, this may seem like negativity, but, like, I think that since we both come from coaching backgrounds, we know that, like, details make differences, and that, like, you don't bring up things that you can't fix, because, like, you'd never go to a 5'5" guy and be like, hey, I need you to be taller. Like, on this possession, you should just be taller. Like, you could probably block more shots. It's like, if you're bringing it up, it's because you believe it can be changed. Like, I mean, this takes a lot of effort. Like, not for nothing. Like, this process takes a lot of effort, and I wouldn't be bringing this up if it wasn't something I thought it would fix. Otherwise, I'd just be like, okay, yeah, he's bad at this. It's not fixable. Keep pushing. It's that, like, there's a great history of tall, skinny dudes adding this, like, aggression and this intentionality about how they move, especially with contact. Like, that's sort of the history of modern basketball. And so, like, to me, this stuff is positive, because, like, I see that, like, his heart doesn't pump Kool-Aid. Like, he wants contact. He's just not smart about how he gets it yet. like it's a very like you might get me, but you're gonna bleed first mentality, which I honestly appreciate. But like if he was going down when people are hitting him, like we would have more of a concern. But it's like you can see that he wants to do these types of finishes. I'm just not sure that he has either figured out the proprioception or is currently able to do them. The area of his defense I found most interesting was that like when he climbs in guards specifically, he can get results. He gets, he gets skinny around screens really well. The under is a little bit of an issue, but like he definitely wants to sit underneath people. Here we get a little bit of that high center of gravity. Like he tries to pull up, the defender jumps it, and like his balance is just leaning forward. You can see that his like when he shoots, his toes are the only thing touching the ground. And like it's a slight thing. Just like the balance level has to get better, the core stability has to get better. But even playing with this poor core stability, even playing with like this poor flexibility level, even playing with like this leg injury from the bike accident, like he's still like capable. He's I don't want to say impactful defender, but he's capable of doing things like I probably didn't think he would, because like he repeatedly keeps trying to be an actor. Like there's intention there.
Yeah, and so in these clips specifically, it's the ball is in front of him, and I feel that's very much like, I mean, it's always easier to get players to engage on ball, but he's like the instincts are there, and I mean, I'm not to the level that a certain other of our fellow group chat mates are. You're in a million group chats, that's a bad example, but like the group chat that we are both a part of, like I don't understand like biomechanics, and nor do I understand like draft coverage like as well as they do. But like for me, it's if he sees it and he can keep it in front, then like he's engaged, and I saw that multiple times throughout this game. Even when he was starting to fatigue, he looked like he was getting run down, and on offense he just sort of like, you just sort of shrug, and he can get the types of shots he wants. But defensively, like he was active and he gave effort.
Yeah, which when you have a 25 usage isn't always guaranteed. Here we're gonna get another. I think it's a pitch and chase. We sort of get like this like brush and fade. I think it's like, I don't know if you've ever built an offense where you kind of get a guy to tap a fake it down screen and just try to get the defender to alter their angle even slightly. On the pick and roll, pulls it out, hits a hezzy. Yes, we're late in the clock, but pops the defender off their feet. Like they should be got him. Like we're out of here. And instead we get a step back. And to me, this goes to like knock down the shot, like points on the board. There is a problem for me when defenders make large mistakes and four other defenders don't pay. So like anytime an on-ball defender makes a real mistake, like popping out of there and shoots on a hezzy, the shell of the defense needs to get broken. Here we have Marina Maker, who hezzy somebody out of their soul. And we have the shell of the defense on, in the middle. And once the hezzy goes again, like once we see this, so it's bad, y'all. There are four people helping them. We're in a difference of like it's a not as late of a shot clock, but still a late shot clock. But the idea is that one person's mistakes is four people. There's now four people's responsibility. Here we can see a difference of like, look at her legs are inside her frame and the handle is outside. A small difference from how Ziaire operates, I think, the hip and general flexibility. Hezzy all the way up. Two defenders immediately. We have a kick. Like getting that extra help is, I think, the difference from where his handle needs to be, because like people are going to pop on like just worrying about the shot. Like, if there's anything we've seen from the NBA, it's like if you're above 6'9" and you can get difficult shots up, defenders will put their hands up for anything. Like this is a league that fell for Dwayne Wade's pump fake for 15 years. Like if you can knock them down, people will jump at them. But then what happens next? And that's to me that's the can should thing, is like, yeah, you can take a step back there, but like, should you make it even?
Yeah, I mean, the step back and the side step, it seems like, he's decided this is what he's going to do. too. So the hezi sort of felt like a hezi to do the hezi, but really he wanted to go to the step back, and it felt like that's what he was going to, like, the whole time. And I think that's a part of it. Something I noticed is, like, you know, he knows he can get to it, and he's good enough that it's a good shot. It's not what, like you were saying, it doesn't put the defense under any more pressure, but he's decided that's what he's going to do, so that's what he gets.
Yeah. And then this is the disruption idea that we're talking about. He has a good possession on ball. You know, fights through. Again, he's defending a guard. He's pretty aware of his surroundings. Fights through this, you know, like, sort of loose situation. Is able to turn his hips. Gets beat on the tie screen. Like, that is a situation where the defender needs to change the ball handler needs to change their shot because of his presence behind them. You're in a blind spot. Like, something needs to shake out. Like, we're in, you know, the end of a first half. He's played most of it. You know, obviously with large usage, but this is one of those situations, like, you need to be a phone booth athlete. You could chip slightly. That's the moment. That's where the explosiveness comes out. Like, have to hunt these moments. So here we're gonna get a slip out of like, sort of a pistol set. On the weak side, we can see nobody's helping them. Like, Colorado does not send a ton of help. They run a split, or he slips the pick and roll, and that little window is about, if you move it too far to the left, the guard will never get to it. And if you throw it too close, the defender can fight over. I liked the moments of actual passing ability. I think the field can be at times sketchy, but, like, the ability to make passes was something that I was, like, consistently interested in from Ziaire. Like, he sees passes well. He sees windows well. I think there's some hand-eye coordination stuff. Here's Rondo doing the exact same play from a couple different angles. Instead of having they have it, like, be a pick and roll cycle versus the mix up on the weak side that Stanford runs. But you're just making sure if that big isn't helping, you're safe to throw it as long as you can hit that window. And this is a fairly advanced pass because, like, it's not a large window. So you have to make a dropper directly into their hands. And you also, like, it's pretty difficult to get the on-ball defender's hands out of the way. Overall, like, I think we're going to see a little bit more of the passing window when he tries to throw into smaller windows on the inside. On penetration later, and some of the struggles with that. But, like, I think the passing to me stuck out as a thing of, like, oh, this is low hanging fruit if you can, you know, fix his if you can fix the proprioception issues. Here we have an inside pick and roll. We're gonna get the bigs in, like, a deeper drop. Sometimes they show a little bit more. Onto this one, he's more aggressive. The ref falls over, which is always nice. And this is empty side. This should be an automatic drop. Takes a small second. So this should be automatic, like, left hand. Like, you see that the big is stepping up in their area. This has to be out quickly. And you'll see there's a slight delay from when he realizes it to when it's actionable. And that's going to be a theme in the second, in like this latter half for him, is that he sees the window, he's aware of the window, he's manipulating to get to the window, but it's just not, he's not capable of executing it.
Yeah, and this is one of those things, is a number of these plays, like you're saying, he sees the pass, it's there, but just it's that rip move, that jab. Like, there are times where, specifically I have in my notes for 330, the play you started it off with, is when he first catches the ball, the slip is predetermined, I think.
Yeah.
So that rip move, or at least a ball fake there, or in the opposite direction, I feel it opens that up a little more, because now the help defender, the one that rotated over and just punched that shot, now he's delayed by just a microsecond. So that's where it gets confusing to me, is when he chooses to do that jab or that rip move, and when he doesn't, because that would have been the place for it.
So this one is one that you had sent me early notes on, of being like, I kind of need to talk to you about the footwork on his shooting. And so, like, here we have an under. This should just be a dead leg. Like, your choice is either to pull directly behind the screen or to keep going. I prefer that shooters just stop behind the screen instead of using like curling it back. And this is sort of the most declarative thing I could say about his footwork, is that I think the footwork is a little messy because he struggles to use his posterior chain, and I think that's what makes the footwork messy, because he doesn't have the stability to do like kills. Like, so he should have killed behind that screen, right? And it's just not. I don't think that there's the stability level to be able to kill like that. And this was the shot that gave it away, because like there's no posterior chain when you watch him shoot. Like he's shooting this with it's just all shins and thighs and what core he has, and then arms up top. He ends up like missing this one, and we'll see like what another like skinnier player looks like, and a stouter player. But like I think that if he does unlock that with flexibility, just like there's not that much there to power this, and I think that that's what is causing the work issues. It's not that his feet are necessarily bad, because like you see, like he moves well. I think the issue is more with how his core handles things. So like let's talk about Carson. This is the most on balance I've ever seen a person. You could paint on a chair there. Like that is full speed downhill. That's cozy. That's as cozy gets shooting a jump. And like, okay, yeah, Carson is built like a barrel. But look how much of the posterior chain he's using to power the shot. A ton. And I don't think that this is a skill necessarily inherent to guys built like that. So let's compare this to another of my fellow Slenderman, Jaden McDaniels. Jaden is sitting down to shoot, and he's powering again, like skinnier legs, concave chest, skinny arms, the same general build, but he's powering through his posterior chain. And when you watch it from the side angle, you see again that like he's not tilted forward, he's not on his toes, he's not using like the front side of his body. It's everything working. And I think this is what is causing the footwork issue, is just like that he is naturally off balance just from the way that his body is. Do you feel like this is a good theory? Like again, because I'm not speaking authoritatively here. This is just an idea.
I do. It makes so much sense to me, and the reason I messaged you about the footwork is just it's like I didn't necessarily get the process behind it, but yeah, core stability, it makes a lot of sense. It's not something I considered like immediately, because like I don't know, I was just watching this game trying to figure Ziaire out, and yeah, so but yeah, two coaches talking, it's like you wouldn't bring something up unless it's fixable. Otherwise, you're just you're just beating a player down essentially, right? So. Yeah.
All right, let me try that again. I'm sorry, I had a bike go by. All right, so to me, like the thing that I'm picking up here is that like this core stability and these flexibility issues are pretty much ever present, and we have his hands like moving slower than his brain is. So here there's a jump switch, and he is like he is run off the line essentially, but he recognizes that like the offensive shape is, or the defensive shape is weird, and there's no help on the backside. So he's able to quickly pick out the lob, but it's still a half beat slower than like what would have been an easy lob. And to me, this looks like a player throwing, but it also looks to me like a player who like does have like some physical limitations that make, you know, like this should be a pull. That's still not a like I've seen him shoot over that level of challenge, and like that's sort of the appeal there. Um, and like that's generally what I'm seeing in these kind of clips is a guy who's still like a possession by possession mixed bag in terms of how he's using his physicality. Like that last catch and this catch do not look the same. Like he's much more unbalanced for this one. It's like, well, why is this happening, and how can he fix it? And like, I'm very encouraged. I'm like, I thought that, I didn't watch as much Stanford in the second half of the year, and I was like, oh, he maybe took a dive, or things went kind of rough. And like in watching back, for this in the breakdown, it was like, oh no, he's just like there's a lot more like weirdness happening, and like weirdness is generally kind of good. Means new things are happening. Here we have an okay closeout. He's able to just like put his hands up in a solid reader of space. The rotations can be hit or miss, but I think that he plots pathways pretty well. Obviously struggles to explode through a transition, and like that for all intents and purposes that should be done. We're still getting there, but like pops up a little bit, still able to fight back and recover. We see him move well laterally, then he predicts the pass well.
Oh, yeah, a lot there. So that one was another example of like that pistol action where he could sort of turn and then he ends up taking a pull up. The clip to me that you were talking about where he comes off that strong action, that double stagger, is I feel as if he had decided like he was going to catch and go in that situation.
Yep.
And he has to go a little wider to get there, and then he sees the drive isn't there, so he picks his head up, and that's when he sees the pass. And so like right at that moment, or no, I guess I was wrong because he split his feet there to attack, but it was as he's coming off, like his head isn't up there, and core stability, posterior chain loading, all of that stuff, like that all comes into play. Like, but when he gets stronger at that, the fact that he is even able to recognize that situation and throw that pass, like these are all obviously encouraging signs.
Yeah, and what do you make of the like extended finishing? Because like the numbers are not fantastic, and like even in this game we've seen, I don't want to say an aversion to contact, but an inability to win consistently with contact or with like not great angles. Like when he has good angles, he can finish. But like in this, where it's not fantastic, kind of just like doesn't get anything. What do you mean?
Okay, well, so I mean, the footwork here it's like I think he's waiting for something to happen that just isn't going to happen. Because I mean, the typical read here is that like a defender is going to take that away, and somebody's running with him. He's not looking for any of that stuff. I think he should know that his teammates are trailing behind, but I don't know what he's looking for here. He's going at this defender, and then he goes left, right, but wide. And then he finishes around. It's just he takes weird angles, and I think it's one of those things where he's been tall, he's been able to finish the way he has wanted to finish, or he predetermines that like, oh, this is going to work just because I have the length, and more he's learning that just doesn't happen against people who are built the way certain athletes are built.
Yeah, people who've been in a college weight room. So I have a second theory. It's probably comorbid, but I think that he's struggling with the idea that people won't fight on fakes, and that they're like, okay, just finish over me. That like college athletes are just like, I'm not like whatever move you have, I'm not buying it. I'm just simply going to jump backwards to go vert. And I think that what he's looking for, this like left to right, is just trying to get a reaction. And when there's none, like, then he's sort of stuck with like this floater, because he's sort of been like, oh well, they'll make a decision and then I'll like through it. So that's my interpretation of it, is him just like not having a solution when teams just go straight. And I think that that's like what we've seen with some of these lake situations. Is guys aren't like jumping for things. They're just like, yeah, just be a body, go straight up and let it finish out.
Right. Yeah. It feels. Yeah. Great point. And the pro hop into the left hand one that also is like, I think the reason why he was so high and wide on that one. I'm not going to ask you to go back, but the reason why he was so high and tall on that one rather is like he's waiting for them to do something, and they don't, and they're just there. It's like finish.
So next we have a jab series. Again, wide foot. We have a pick and roll coming, and I think that, again, look at that leg. It's pretty far out there. He's playing outside of his body, where he's a lot less, or his legs are outside of his body, where he has a lot less stability. And we can see that he gets a little bit of movement from the defender, but he's still not attacking what their intentions are. Like he's allowing defenders to climb into him, and not like forcing them to reconsider. I do like this floater, and this is also a thing that led me to believe that he was like really front loaded. Is like, look how well he stops moving in terms of the forward momentum. And that was the thing that really hit me to like, okay, I think that he's all of his strength in the front side. Here again, like inside of the body, legs are all the way out, which, as we've seen from his handle series, results in problems. I think he goes like double cross and then loses it, or gets knocked away from him. Again, I just would want him to work on that, stretching out those hip joints, getting those physical issues started to sort out. We can see like what one of his catches means to defenders, where like they close out hard, and he's getting these like very respectable, very positive closeouts. And I think that like so much of like his decision making is generally threatening. I believe we get another one here. This is I love this type of set where the guy from the dunker spot lifts up, and so it's a surprise rotation for the guy who was defending the corner, which is now the slot, and another slight delay. Again, just the decision is, I don't want to say the pass is a half second late for the window, and I think he makes the decision before, but he isn't able to get it out from his, because the ball's on his right, to bring it from his right to his left. He just isn't like optimized there, and that's what turns this from an open layup to a foul. Like this is a pretty small window, but you can see like as he's picking it up, he has to shift from balls on your right to outside over to his left, and that's enough time that I think it's again McKinley is able to close down that window. And again, we talked to just the latency of idea to execution.
Yeah, so I mean, roll and replace is a super cool concept, which I think that's what's happening here. Is that when there's a big down and the big up, when you're rolling into that space, there's a player coming out, and that makes whose tag is it? In that situation, I think what I saw is, if you let it run, is that he, like, his body is a little more, if he gets his body slightly more turned because he's driving at the guy, and then he sort of, I think, like you're saying, like he sees the pass there, but he gets it there late. If he's able to attack and then force the defenders like slightly further back with more strength, more anything like that, I think that's, or if he just gets faster at that like pound dribble or whatever, so he can pick it up and throw it with two hands, like that's gonna be there. But the fact that he recognized it is, again, like super encouraging to me.
Yeah, he's also just really high. He's really high in his hips. If he's able to be low, like that's a quick between the legs, that's a quick cross. Like his hips are so high, he rides so high. But like if he's able to just get lower, that's a pretty quick change direction. Balls out low, and like that's, as we're going to see as we go, a bit of a concern for him, especially when he gets defenses into compromising positions. Again, like this is a situation where you need to take advantage. Everybody is across the help side. You've just shifted the point of attack defender badly, and your big has a high side seal, and like that's a fine shot. That's a reasonable, like it's a, if you're telling somebody that's the result of a position, they're not going to be like super upset. Like a lightly contested mid-range jumper from one dribble, but it's just not this is not as threatening once he beats the first guy from a defensive perspective. Like you want to have threatened more than just those two.
Right. Something I would like you to maybe to talk to me about is like his footwork on that pull up there where he takes the elbow jumper. Like, you know, the defense has been compromised. Like he's not. If it feels weird to me because it's like anytime he gets, and I have it in my notes here as a right left, but like I might be wrong there. But anytime he gets that like right left and his left foot is like his left ankle is like turning slightly. Yeah. Those always like the 2 or 3 shots he took this game with those angles. It's just it never felt like those shots were going in even as he was pulling up. Is there something like I'm missing there biomechanically or like?
Yeah,
you know,
I think that he has some back alignment issues. Your legs will turn a little bit if you have like lower back stress or upper back stress. Your legs will like invert slightly, or you know, like, you know, if your hips are if your like sacrum is diagonal, or your legs and like, you know, when you bounce them or when you're hanging like hurt a little bit. I think you just like it's probably some of that sort of thing. But to me, I think the fact that he was always taking that shot is more concerning than any of the footwork.
Gotcha.
That was always the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say I like that his arms are almost always up. That's a thing that I do appreciate. After doing a lot of these, it's not universal. Here we get a real. This is his best rip through in the entire time. He gets such a good reaction because he pairs what he's seeing with what the defender is trying to do. The defender is trying to fight uphill to make sure he doesn't get to the screen. He fakes at the screen. He gets a full reaction. The defender is a full step behind him. He's able to. I mean, he gets into a jumper, but it is the best pairing of like what we're talking about in terms of like matching what the defender's trying to take away with the move to trigger the coverage that we've seen. Usually he's sort of like just kind of trying an idea, but here he's like, oh, I know he's going to do that, and it works out specifically because he's paired his perception of the coverage with what the coverage is. And this is the ultimate could, can, should. So like this is just it's a catch. As an offensive player, this feels like a situation where you want to be super aggressive because you have sort of tilted feet and you're like, oh, I see open space, let me attack. But if you look at the shape behind the closeout, it's a perfect square. Like everybody is exactly where they want to be. Like they've never been happier, and they're just going to push that ball handler is getting pushed flat towards that baseline 10 times out of 10. And then everybody's in a rotation space where they can move to whatever spot they need to. And in this circumstance, it's not that you want to fight uphill to that pick and roll, because like you might not be able to, but it's just that you can't charge downhill. You have to be patient. You have to make sure every person in that square is making a decision. And this is just a predetermined decision thing of like, okay, open space, let me attack it. I get a pull-up jumper. Again, fine jumper, nowhere near contested. Like I trust him to knock that down. I'm totally fine with that shot. The process is the concern. So like here's almost the exact same circumstance from Caruso. And here we're watching the Raptors defense execute this magic. But like he, again, charges downhill. He doesn't quite, like he slows down a little bit more, but it's not enough. And Van Fleet is able to, having 2 responsibilities, cover both. So he has Dwight and he has PCB in the corner. And because Caruso doesn't force him to choose, he's allowed to cover both. And that's the solution, is just not making early decisions, but instead forcing the defense to make choices that they may not be.
Yeah, I mean, young players, that's the thing, is the game, there's, you know, if you predetermine stuff, like you are shortchanging yourself. The game is a lot easier and it moves a lot slower when you start to process reads and make the defense react to you, as opposed to, you know, the opening is fine, it's there, but you've now taken what was a small advantage because you know you can get to that spot and you haven't made anything of it. Small advantage to big advantage is not something that happened on that play.
Speaking of things that can't really happen, that like you need to read, this is not enough of a denial to prevent a player like him from getting like full stop. Like this for the level of gravity that he has. Like you either need to make them commit and go like full denial, like body to body selling out and then you backdoor. But like this is sort of a no man's land denial where they're not denying far enough that you can like truly backcut it, but it's also enough of a denial that you can't like just go get the ball. And so like to me, this is a circumstance where you need to go initiate that physicality to make the defense choose. You're allowing them to not choose right now, in the same way that Caruso, didn't force Fred VanVleet to pick a choice between his two defenders. This is a choice between, am I fully denying, or like which one is it? Do you want me to not have the ball, or are you keeping me to a side? It can't be both. And here we allow both, and because we allow both, the possession kind of goes downhill. And I think this is just like he's more comfortable popping out. Like in high school, this would just be out, like go to the volleyball line, get the ball, and we can go. As you have at each level where you have less and less physical advantage, that becomes less and less fun. Like you just can't allow an NBA defense if you don't have like Zion's tools, and even Zion, like just pulling back and letting an NBA defense reset just isn't good. Like there's a defensive coordinator just clapping like that's a win. They're just allowing that to win. But here we have double behind the back, loses it a little bit. This is a latency issue. He makes the right read. He sees, okay, we have a pretty deep middle guy. I'm going to get a dig, so we kind of have one defender for these two weak side guys. He just takes a half-second extra dribble, and the difference between if he fired it on the first screenshot and the second screenshot is that guy at the free throw line would be able to deflect. So because he waits a little too long and like confirming what his suspicion of the coverage was, it becomes a deflection. So instead of trusting his intuition and being like, no, it's out, I think he either takes a second or it's a second late, like with with just like the processing stuff, or just processing to action. Because it's that little second, instead of firing a one-hand pass, it's a two-hand pass, and it results in turnover. So what do you normally tell your players when somebody's crowding them?
Oh, well, I have changed that policy because players have been more not limited, but like I've had I don't necessarily know like what it is now because like I'm still going through the process of like, oh, this didn't work last year and it didn't really work the year before. But I don't know. Normally, like I think once upon a time the answer used to be like if they're crowding you like that, hard rip, and see what you can get there. With this spacing, I don't necessarily know because it looks like I think it was a pitch into a ball screen, so it's like Miami. But like that's so many bodies, I don't know if I want him driving here. I don't. What do you normally tell your players?
So I've become a big believer in make the defender double down.
Okay.
So here we're gonna see like the idea behind make them double down is that if they crowd you once, like you can jab them away, and when they try to redo, like to say they're being told to crowd them every possession, when they are coming towards you, that's when you can go by them. So like you create a little bit of space, and some people will back off. Like that's all it takes for them to be like, I'm not, like I was just here to make you a little uncomfortable. But this is I think why Pat Bev has such a problem with Luka is Luka will bump him off, and Pat Bev wants to climb in again, and then Luka says, "Oh, we're going opposite directions." So while Pat Bev is climbing up, Luka's going by. And yeah, Luka's not doing it very quickly, but he has the angle in it. So we're going to talk about a number of different ways that like even players who have high hips and skinny can force defenders to double down and therefore use the aggressiveness against them. So here, he rondos, he gets into this position. Like this is sort of a jail, but like you see that he is not in a position that can be held. He's bent over at the waist versus like sitting in a stance. This is just a point to like him not being totally cogent in terms of like the ability to hold positions. So like here, this is where he needs to reclaim his space. He doesn't. He bananas out. He rondos. Now we have a second screen. Kind of sits in jail. He doesn't make them sit. He throws the right pass, but he just times it off a second. So here is an example of somebody trying to crowd Spencer Dinwiddie. Spencer Dinwiddie's a little bit stronger, but Spencer Dinwiddie's like, okay, you want to come try me at about the half court line, sure. So jab, the opposite way. He gets a commitment. So now, again, he's bent at the waist, but I mean, we're talking about a little different circumstance. So then he's going to hard rip. Now watch what Terrence Ross's feet do when he hard rips. So he has a commitment now that it's downhill, so he could go into that screen whenever he wants to. But instead, he firms up a commitment. So now it's not just aggressive. Rip gets him to drop a foot, attack, and Ross has to recover by that. So by taking that extra second of being like, that's cool, you want to be aggressive, which way are you pushing me? And a lot of defenders will just sort of babble. Like, that's what this is. Like, here, Terrence Ross, middle, no, it's not, now it's downhill, now it's downhill. Like, he just got his feet hot, and when you get somebody's feet moving like that, it's now over. It doesn't matter if they're stronger or not. You find the right time, you go by them. There is a second approach, and you knew we were going to talk about it. It is the best way of making a defender who wants to be aggressive guard you. And this is a little bit different circumstance, but this is how you use a defender's aggression against them with that. That's right, folks. You knew it was going to happen. We'll talk stutter rip. So Jimmy starts in a face up. Wait, what? He just blew right by him. Let's look at the alternate angle. So we get a declarative on the side. We get our first rip through. You can see that Jalen is not buying. So we've started middle. We're ripping through to the sideline. Jimmy stops, and now he's on the baseline, and he rips it back to the original side. So side from all the way through to baseline. Now we're looking back to middle. Jimmy's eyes are middle. So this is our second motion. So making a Z out. Now we make the diagonal to look out. You can see Jalen, his hips have started to turn a little bit. He's declaring a side. He's saying, hey, what I can't do is allow that middle. So now we get a little more of a turn because he's whipping that out. So baseline, back to the middle. What happens when Jalen turns his body? We go back to that side. So baseline, middle, baseline. 3 steps, nice and easy, because he's selling the aggressiveness. It's like, okay, if you want to be aggressive, follow the ball. You want to say no middle? Follow the ball. And you get him to overcommit middle. And then once he overcommits far enough, loses his balance. You see the hips tilted, you see the shoulders tilted. Those are things that are going to end in it. So I'll watch it again. Yeah. Like, stutter rip is a thing that works always. You can do it on the perimeter as well. But it's 2 rip throughs, but just with like a glitch in the middle. And for defenders who follow the ball, they're always going to get aggressive with the first and second movements, which makes the third one 5. Just for a third time, because I'm a masochist and I love a stutter rip. Because this is what you do is when people crowd your space, it doesn't matter your strength level. I mean, like, Jimmy's not like so much stronger than Jalen or vice versa. It's that aggressiveness is a weapon to be turned against. You cede space to them, they're winning. But if you're manipulating them to make their aggressiveness a weapon against them, then your strength level doesn't particularly.
I mean, there's nothing I can add to that. That was perfect.
Skip. So compare that to this. Like, which foot is he targeting? Which way is he pushing the defender? The defender is saying no middle, and he's jabbing out. Like, this is the perception averaging coupling that was sort of hammered on. He gets middle. The perfect thing to do here is to pick up your dribble to half spin and hit the crack back that's lifting back into your spot. Like, it's that recognizing that, like, the defense, even if you break the first level, there's going to be traps set against you, and like, it doesn't really matter if you break that. You have to make any decision that you make is going to result in rotation. So preempt those rotations and make more. If you are good enough to beat your first defender, you're now playing 1-on-2 of you versus 2 levels of defense, and that's where the fun starts, because you can start manipulating because they don't communicate fast enough or enough, and you can really start messing with people. Like, oh, you thought I was going this way? Okay, pick up the dribble first. And that's the level that I think he's still getting to. Is that, like, playing games against help side, and then, like, once you beat the first 2 defenders, you have the third one, so on and so forth. So thank you for taking this a little bit longer than usual. Look, you get talking about motion offense and you run a little bit long. That's how it is. So I'm going to say, what conclusions do you have about Ziaire Williams within his offensive context?
I mean, the can should question is like he like you were saying, he can get these shots, but these are the things that the defense is willing to give up anyway. When he gets a little bit stronger, when his process gets just that much quicker, I find like point number 2 is taking more than the defense gives you. That will be much easier for him when, you know, he has grown, like when there's been progression from an athletic / processing standpoint. The taking more than defense can give you will be much easier. So the can should divide. It's you can close that gap a little bit more. For offensive context, I don't necessarily know if Stanford and what they did, like it's fun to watch this horizontal style, but I don't know if that style fit him the best.
So that's an interesting question, because like I've gotten a lot of questions about, like, you know, you play the counterfactual game of like, if this prospect went to this situation, and like, are they good fits for them, but also like, are they good fits for their development? And I think that Stanford was a really good fit for Ziaire, but it's also like kind of a funny fit for his development, because the offense was so like, I think what me and you would like really like is so ideal, like the movement, all of this, but it didn't force him to like answer as many difficult questions where it's like, oh, the offense can get him into spaces where like a mid-range jumper is a great solution. And I think I almost wanted him in a space where he had to ask a little harder questions, like where he had to be like, okay, so I'm reading this help side defender, and the read is if they take 2 steps, I have a one-handed skip pass at the top. I'm like, I don't know where that college or fit would have been for him, because like that's a pretty hard responsibility to give to a 19-year-old who's still growing, or an 18-year-old who's still growing or whatever. But like I think the next level offense I would want for him is him like really being put into situations like, all right, pick between these 2 options. So I think that my conclusion from his offensive context is, I think, a better understanding of where I would like to see him next, and like it gives me a pretty good idea of what his like true strengths are. And I think that it's working on point 2, which is taking more than the defense gives you as his body develops. Finding defensive disruption and physical challenges to me are the same thing, because I think that he's in the right situations a lot. Like he's not perfect with rotations. He's not, you know, like a masterful technique defender, but he's in close enough areas where I think he will eventually make the plays that are necessary for him to reach like the higher level of prospect status in his like during his rookie contract. It's just a matter of getting the physical ability to like have those mean something. Like, yeah, you're trailing a point guard size defender. Like, can you get to the point where you can load up off 2 feet and clean it off the ball? And those are going, to me, that's a big deal, because like, look, I'm gonna say that he's like a minus. Like for college, he was a minus, and he still put up like a reasonable block and steal, which I would say is a good sign. In the same way that like Cam Reddish like put up a good block and steal rate in a much more weird college year, but like he was hurt, and he was also like had real physical limitations. He was a better mover, but like, you know, Cam had some real like lift issues in the half course percent. And like you could be like, okay, he understands the game well enough. Like when we figure those things out, so like the defense will get to the point where they're there. And like we've seen Cam be awesome on ball. Not that those 2 things are analogous, but like there are data points in a solution where it's like, okay, so the NBA broadly seems to have some of these ideas, and you know, like this seems to be an archetype that they're pretty comfortable with. The last one is I think the most important one, which is the can should divide. And to me, this is a question of, if you have a definitive answer for how he should be deployed offensively, it speaks to what archetype he is. Because like Gallo is a type of guy. Like we have guys who are play ending creators who like can sort of be bailout options, or like, hey, give me a bucket options, that are varying levels of shooter. And you can build a team, or you can build lineups around them on a team. You can build lineups around them because you know that you will always have a certain amount of matchup. And if they can defend, that's even better. But like MPJ is sort of the same idea. Like there are a lot of at different usage intervals, like play finishing fours who can also create for themselves. Can they create for others is the line of like, if they can create for others, that's a star. If they can't create for others, that's a very, very, very helpful player into the playoffs. And that's where the can should divide is like, if you have a better understanding on should and you're capable of being like, this is a shot that the defense like doesn't want me to take and I can get to those, like then you're in a great place, and that's a foundational player.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I should applaud. Well said.
Okay. Well, I'm going to get a little bit of water. If you guys would mind sending in some questions, I will grab a little bit of water back in like 45 seconds. See you on the other slide. Welcome back. Okay. So I wanted to scroll back to a wonderful question that we got earlier. That is about the nature of development. And it is from Gabe Doe, who asks, how do you train your players in a way to make the right decisions against moving defense? Do you try and incentivize decisions that would punish where rotations typically come from, or you do try and incentivize true interpretation and response?
Do you wanna start?
Oh, I think this should be your first go.
Um, fine.
It's from much earlier. I can read it again if you want.
Yes.
Okay. The question is, how do you train your players in a way to make the right decisions against moving defense? Do you try and incentivize decisions that would punish where rotations typically come from, or do you try and incentivize true interpretation and response?
So I think it's you know, the cop out answer is depends on your player, right?
No, the question is, how do you? They're asking
Oh,
you, how do you do it in your life?
okay. How do I do it? Okay. Well, so I would say always on the. I try to put players in positions where it's a harder or faster read than it would be in a game. So, a forced I don't necessarily like, oh, you're gonna get beat here. I try to build in reads where it's like, okay, so we're gonna play 5-on-4 shell, and then so the offense has the advantage. But as soon as the second pass is made, or I won't tell the offense when the defense is coming in, but the defense is going to be coming in with another one. And so now you have to, you have the advantage, you're attacking, the defense is scrambling. Now it's, okay, what read are you going to make? Who is trying to do what? And so on and so forth. So I guess, I mean, there's a way to build it into where, so, you know, I would lean more to incentivized decisions that would punish where the rotations typically come from as the season progresses. But you want to see where you're at with your players, like off the jump. Like you want to see what they naturally want to do. And if a player is more limited in their decision making, then you sort of like shift away from that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, to me, the leader in this field is Chris Oliver in Basketball Immersion, doing decision training by building circumstances that are layered. So like there is a natural response where it's like, you know, say you're playing in a game where only one player can dribble, or you're playing in a game where anytime a player, the defender turns their head, a cut has to happen. Playing, you know, 4-on-5, 3-on-2, playing, you know, on diagonal baskets. I think that there are a lot of ways to encourage the decisions that you want by creating circumstances where those decisions are presented. I don't think that you have to punish. I think you punish the reads that you don't want. So it's like, oh yeah, if you don't want dribbling, like a player over dribbling, you put a dribble limit in. So I think that you create the circumstances of play, and then once you show that play is possible in that way, players interpret it their own way. So you build the rules to disincentivize the play style that you don't believe is good basketball. And like I'm trying to leave that as vague as possible because everybody has different solutions. But I think that the thing that I would generally encourage is being as creative with the structure of basketball as possible, because that will allow fresh decisions being made where like we've all done 3-on-2, 2-on-1, where you just make the same read every single time. Like every single time you never do anything and it never applies to a game because 3-on-2, 2-on-1 never happen. You just never have it to. So by trying to figure out what situations happen most and where players are weakest, and trying to build as leveraged of situations as possible to learn about that decision as much and how they respond to that situation. That is generally how I've developed players and how I believe that player development should work. Okay. The next question that we have. Okay. A wonderful question from Hoop Goose. We have, if you were tasked with creating a draft workout for Ziaire, but only could choose 3 drills or situations, what would they be?
This is this feels like a you lead, and if I have anything, I'll follow.
Yeah, I mean, like I would want to test my ideas about like how his flexibility works. I would really like to see like some of the drills that we talked about in NDSP 2, about like testing self-organization, because like I think his self-organization is fairly high. I think I think it's the like when that self-organization reaches specific limits involved in the posterior chain, that's when it gets funky. So I would just like really like to test out some like how he shoots when he has to involve like the strongest part of his body. The other two would just be like just really leveraged 3-on-2 or 4-on-3 weak side pick and roll situations. Like just throw a different coverage every single time and make him read the weak side while they X out. That would be really interesting to me. And then I think for the third one, if I can like cheat and take a P3 drill, I would like to see about his force generation out of a lunge stance or the stances that would replicate first step. So that would be another way of confirming um, some of the ideas that we've had.
Yeah, I'm not gonna try and add to that. Those were all great. Yeah, forced decision making. See how he reacts to certain things. Like he's going to be seeing in the league, and um, yeah, I guess I mean the value of it based on your personnel and who you already have on roster. Or who you will have on roster, you start to build out like, okay, well, if this is the personnel around him, like, what's he going to do in these situations against NBA level defense, so on.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a two-part question from Sawyer QT. Are the Sacramento Kings a good developmental situation for Ziaire? And if not, do you have a team situation that jumps out to mind?
Again, an all you situation.
So
I
like I kind of like the Kings fit. Like with Rashawn, I still think that they're gonna need like a bigger bodied wing to like take the defensive assignments. Like I think it would certainly be one of my favorite teams to watch. I think that you'd displace some of the passing because like Halliburton and Fox, they're just going to have the ball in their hands so much, and I think that I would want him in a place where he has to make some reads for team situations that are ideal. That's a little more tough. I'm just thinking off the top of my head if I had to pick a certain place where he should or I would like to see him most. I mean, is it cheating to see the Warriors? Because I would really like to see like I think that he did a very good job of shaking and finding open shots, and that seems to be a thing that Steph really likes in his wings. And they certainly have. Oh, that was the old medical staff. I think that they have a need for wings and a need for shoot. He's certainly high upside. Does that do anything for you, Warriors? Okay. Next, we have: do you worry about Ziaire being placed in a strict 3-and-D box? And do you think that is? Do you think that's best for him or no?
Oof. I think like the conventional understanding of like 3-and-D, based on the conversations that Samson and I have on bouncing around and with other people, is just like it's. I don't know who you think of now as like a typical like 3-and-D guy, because like for a long time it was like Robert Covington, but like I never really thought that would fit. He does more stuff like with the ball than what I imagine a 3-and-D type of player would be. Like a 3-and-D player to me is like a floor spacer, spot up shooter, and then brings stuff defensively. Ziaire is somebody who I feel like when he like figures out or progresses to the point that we're talking about of like more athletic load push, he's able to load better, he's able to make quicker decisions. He's somebody you want with the ball in his hands, attacking second side, third side, in a in a horizontal setting, as like not necessarily the Utah Jazz, but like in a type of like the defense has now shifted and now he can go. I guess no.
Yeah, I don't generally think 3-and-D players exist. Like true 3-and-D players, like guys who have like a 75 or a 750 3-point attempt rate play defense. Like that's just not a type of dude who really exists. Because like otherwise, like if 3-and-D players were really as valuable as people pretend they are, or as large as they loom in the national conference, like everybody trying to play like Kent Bazemore. Do you feel like the draft and free agency are like full of maxing dudes who play like Kent Bazemore? Not particularly, right? Like 3-and-D dudes get paid. Like don't get me wrong. That corner three will pay for your mom, your grandma, your great, or your great grandma, your great great grandkids. Like that corner three will get you paid. but like that's not necessarily like a team building archetype. It's more like a situational archetype for players who are starting to graft on towards being dribble pass shoot players. Like I generally think of like 3 and D being like a Charmeleon phase, where like you have it's nice to have, but like very few like. Have you ever not evolved a Charmeleon to a Charizard? Because I've never done it. Get me to that. Like, look, Charmeleon, great, knocks out some of those middle gym leaders. Really appreciate what Charmeleon's done for the cause. The second it involves a Charizard, like you just try to get as much extra at it as possible. So I think that 3 and D, I think that it's more likely that people turn him into like a 4 shot maker, like just being like, okay, yeah, take what, like take shots. If you're making them, we'll play you. If not, we'll pull you. To me, that's a little more dangerous because it's like just being a one-way offensive threat doesn't always translate to reaching that long-term dribble pass shoot guy. And I think that there is a certain amount of volume, or a certain volume of decisions that have to be reached, whether it's in a G League or a summer or against bench units, like that has to be hit for players to develop. The next question is from Francis. How worried do you get about players learning bad habits due to playing through and compensating for injuries? How often do those habits stick? I'll say that like for extremely bad injuries, it can be like players often learn like movement styles that don't threaten the injury. You'll see this occasionally with like guys who have really bad crash landings. But often for like single seasons, it'll just be like one injury causes another, like, the stuff that happens with Kawhi. I don't think it's that much to be worried about. I think that like understanding that an injury occurred is more important than like compensatory injuries. Like it's just pretty rare that you get college guys who have issues where like their knee, they have a calf injury and it leads to an Achilles injury. Like usually they have a pretty because there's the draft looming, they'll just pull out. Don't have to worry about it. His second question is: Do playbook brown nosers by showing? I'm sorry. Let me read this in full. Do playoff brown nosers (parenthetical) players who make any effort to suck up to the coaches by showing their scheme and film knowledge annoy you after a certain point?
Yes, 100%. Because I mean, often players who are trying to suck up and like they understand the scheme. Yeah, dude, like coaches know when you know where you're supposed to be or not, and when you know when where your teammates are supposed to be. So like showing me that you know it by like telling your teammates or telling me, like it annoys me. It just redirect your teammate, because at that point, like whether, I mean, depending on the type of player he is, or yeah, in my experience, it's a he. Depending on the type of player he is, like you expect that person to be more of a leader then, because like, okay, if you understand where everybody's supposed to be, then how come you didn't call out the coverage or like QB them to the right spots, etc., etc. So yes, they do annoy me.
I love it because it's the best. It's one of the better outcomes of know-it-all, because there's generally like nobody really, like I was as a freshman in high school, I swear I made this one basketball team by like asking for directions on everything within an offense, being like, is this a 45-degree cut or a 60-degree cut? Like, am I on his inside or outside? Just like every day at practice, I like had this one assistant coach where I would just like grab his shirt and just like ask a question every like 4 minutes. The problem is that like usually brown nosers turn into something, and either that's you get like a player who has opinions because they know the scheme so well, or you get the worst version where you have a player who has knowledge, who is like, no, that's wrong. It's not like, oh, I think we should do it this way. It's like, no, that's bad. And that's the ultimate outcome of brown nosers. Where like once you've had a couple of those, of guys being like, hey, I hate that. I mean, again, full disclosure, I was that for a period of time for coaches, where it's like, no, that flare is a bad decision. Like we shouldn't install the flare. It should be a slip, not a flare. You start to love brown nosers again, because you're like, I liked it when he thought I was cool. Now this one just seems to think I'm the worst, and wants to be the coach and the player. Again, once you've had a couple of the like full blown basketball geniuses, you just love a brown noser because you're the smart one in that circumstance. But generally, the players who have really strong opinions about offensive and defensive play calls are generally my favorite. Let's see, finish out with one more. Do we have one last philosophy one before we get out of here? This will be our last one. Let me scroll back and see if we have anything. Yes, Jared Hayes is extremely good at his job. Potential future Kansas coach, maybe. We will see. Got some 3&D questions. I don't know. I want to end with something a little bit more fun.
Samson, I know you're listening. Ask a question.
You said ask a question. Can you ask it in the James Harden voice?
No, I'm waiting for it because he sent me a message telling me I'm doing a good job, which I really appreciate. Thanks, man. But ask a question. Now is your time. Also, if while we're waiting on a question while you're looking for one, I would just like to talk about the last episode of Bouncing Around. Samson does a terrific SNL intro.
Loved it.
He had the idea for it, So if you guys liked it,
just
Samson Folk.
While we're waiting for a final question to come in, let's just hit our promos now, and we can edit out on the question. So tell the folks where to find you. Tell them, if they're new to the extended universe, where you would recommend starting, where they can support. Say anything.
Okay. Well, for me, you can reach me at Evin Gualberto, which is if you need help with it, it's EVIN GUALBERTO. You can Google that. My YouTube will come up, and from there, you can go down a rabbit hole of Bouncing Around, which is the NBA/video breakdown podcast that I do with my good friend Samson Folk. You can jump in on WNBA stuff. That WNBA podcast is called The Step Through. I do with Sabrina Merchant. I also do like player compilations and just general film study on the channel. So that's all there. If you would like to reach me, I am on Twitter at Evin, EVIN_GUAL. I always appreciate questions and comments, concerns, whatever have you. If you want to tweet at me, it's always fun engaging with people. And when they ask me questions, more often than not, I in fact do not have any confidence in my answer. So I will go out and find you some resources for your answer. And yeah, it helps me learn too. And that's all I got.
Yeah, there would be absolutely zero chance that this show would get made without your contributions to the basketball internet. I believe I've used about 5 or 6 of the compilations in every single one of these. Just a resource going back years and years and years and years. Thank you, Flurry. I guess I'll do my plugs. If you are interested in long form, not that this isn't long, I just saw the time. Not that this isn't long. If you're interested in long form draft breakdowns or coverage of rookies in the league, my Patreon is PD Web. I recently wrote a Jonathan Kuminga piece that I think is authoritative. I seem to have, for whatever reason, be unable to write less than 5,000 words on this cycle. And I needed every single one for Kuminga, who's a player that I think has a broad misconception about how he plays and about the challenges that are really specific to him on his rookie contract, and one that I honestly can recommend. That's it. I mean, if you're here, read that. If you have help bucks, swing it that way. I want to say thank you to each and every one of the people who support me me on Patreon, I wouldn't be able to do this, take the time, take the effort, do anything that I'm able to get around this basketball, and it's each and every one of you guys. I just want to say thank you so much. Hoop Hoots asks our final question, and one that I am so thankful for him asking. If you were to make a micro skill video for Ziaire Williams, what skill would you focus on?
Oh man. Why are you like this, Goose?
Fantastic question.
Yeah. Whew. Okay, so based on so that's the interesting thing about this particular project that the homework that you've assigned me is that we looked at an average game, and I tried to stay away from until I finished doing my deep dive on this game in particular, and the Stanford offense as currently constructed. Like, I looked at like a regular game, and so this isn't one where he was great or bad. And PD and I we've talked about not wanting to oversell, like, oh yeah, he did 2 good things in this game, and I'm gonna clip it, and then it's going to be the focus of the video. So based on this game and what I've seen, like, I guess that step back, like, you have to go to I know if this is a game that's average for him and he went to that step back like 2 or 3 times and he cashed it almost every time, like, that'd probably be the thing. I don't necessarily know if it's like a micro skill, but like, I have step back videos for exactly this reason, is because I can't figure out a way to broaden like what a player is doing. But a step back is a video I have in my catalog, or a series I have in my catalog, so probably be some sort of step back alliteration, something like that.
Can I just get that?
And then
title?
maybe defense.
Can I just get that title right now? Blank separation, fill in the blank.
Because it's not superb, because that's generally what I use, superb separation, but it's not. It's really not. It's just
stand out.
I think I want to say like sneaky separation, something like
sneaky.
that.
I like sneaky separation marks. Okay. Well, thank you guys. I've kept you long enough. Thank you to everybody who's in chat. I know we are NBA Game Zone. Some people are listening while they watch. I just want to say thank you for stopping by. Thank you to everybody. And we are on a short week. I'm very excited for our next guest, next stream. It is going to be Wednesday, and it is going to be on Eb Mobley. I hope to see you then. Have a wonderful night.